Florida is often sold as a paradise of endless sun and neon dreams, a coastal sanctuary where the world comes to escape. But beneath the swaying palms and the humid breeze lies a much darker reality, a soil soaked in secrets that the daylight refuses to acknowledge. In this video, you will follow 3 macabre stories that prove the darkness in Florida is as deep as its oceans and just as unforgiving. We will explore the day a man became a predator in broad daylight, the week a university became a hunting ground, and the decades-long wait for justice after a child was taken by the night. Prepare yourself, for once you step into these shadows, the sunlight will never look quite the same again. The MacArthur Causeway devourer. The Florida sun is not a healer. It is a relentless interrogator that exposes every crack in the pavement. On May 26, 2012, the heat over Miami reached a stifling peak, shimmering off the MacArthur Causeway like a fever. This concrete artery, connecting the mainland to Miami Beach, became the stage for a primitive and visceral regression. Rudy Eugene was driving his car across this expanse, a man whose life was a series of quiet, hidden failures. Suddenly, the vehicle stalled, but it wasn't just the engine that died. Something inside Eugene's psyche seemed to extinguish. He abandoned the car, leaving behind the remnants of a civilized life, and began to walk toward a dark destination. The walk was slow, rhythmic, and purposeful, as if he were being pulled by an invisible force of pure malice. As he moved, he began to shed his clothing, discarding the garments of humanity onto the scorching black asphalt. Travelers in air-conditioned cars watched in confusion, unaware that they were witnessing the birth of a modern nightmare. Beneath the elevated highway, in a patch of shade that offered no comfort, lay the elderly Ronald Popple. Popple had learned to survive on the crumbs of a world that didn't see him, resting with his eyes closed. He did not hear the approach of the shadow that was about to eclipse his very existence on that sidewalk. There was no argument, no demand for money, and no warning before the descent into absolute madness began. Eugene dropped to his knees, pinning the man to the ground with a strength that felt supernatural and unyielding. He didn't use a knife. He used the most basic weapons available to a predator, his own sharpened teeth. The first strike was a blur of motion, a sudden sound of tearing that signaled the end of Popo's peace. Eugene began to systematically remove Popo's face, starting with the eyes and moving across the cheeks with precision. For 18 minutes, the MacArthur Causeway was transformed into a slaughterhouse while the rest of Miami watched. Passing cyclists slowed down, their disbelief manifesting as a cold sweat as they watched the blood pool. One witness described the sound not as a struggle, but as a feast, the wet noise of flesh being consumed. Popo's screams were eventually silenced by the shock, his body entering a state of complete and total surrender. The police were called by frantic motorists, their voices trembling as they described a scene that defied logic. When the first officer arrived, he saw a sight that would haunt his career and eventually his deepest sleep. Eugene was covered in blood, his mouth full of tissue, looking up with eyes that held no human light. The officer drew his weapon and commanded the attacker to stop, but Eugene only responded with a low growl. It was a guttural sound that didn't belong to a man, but to something much older and significantly darker. The officer fired a single shot, but Eugene didn't flinch. He simply returned to his grisly cannibalistic task. A second shot followed, then a third, and finally a volley of gunfire that forced the monster to collapse. Rudy Eugene died on that sidewalk, his blood mixing with the blood of the man he tried to erase. Emergency crews worked on Popo, but there was little left of the face he had worn for 60 years. He had lost his nose, his forehead, and both eyes to the relentless and unexplained hunger of a stranger. The media dubbed Eugene the Miami Zombie, a label that simplified the horror but offered no real answers. The city waited for toxicology reports, hoping for a chemical explanation for such a total loss of humanity. They wanted to hear about synthetic drugs, about substances that could cause such extreme detachment from reality. But the medical examiner's report was a chilling disappointment to those seeking a simple, manageable cause. Only marijuana was found in Eugene's system, nothing that could explain the predatory rage of that Saturday afternoon. This left Miami with a terrifying void where a logical explanation should have been provided to the people. It suggested that the transition from man to beast is a thin line that can snap without any warning. Ronald Popple survived, spending the rest of his life in a specialized facility, forever blinded by the encounter. He refused reconstructive surgery, choosing to live with the physical memory of what happened under the bridge. The causeway continues to carry tourists every day, its concrete bleached white by the relentless and heavy sun. But those who know the history walk a little faster when they pass that specific patch of sidewalk. They can still feel the lingering residue of that 18-minute window into a primitive version of hell. The event remains a cornerstone of Florida's dark folklore, a reminder that the sun doesn't just illuminate, sometimes it burns away the soul until only the predator remains, waiting for the next victim to arrive. The investigation into Eugene's past revealed a man who was struggling, yet nothing pointed to such violence. His friends and family were left in a state of shock, unable to reconcile the man they knew with the beast. It raises the question of whether a dormant evil resides in everyone, waiting for the right spark to ignite. Have you ever stopped to think that the videos you just watched, with flawless scripts and engaging narrations, might have been created by someone who never even touched a camera or a microphone? There is a new digital elite profiting heavily behind the scenes of YouTube and social media, building massive channels without ever showing their faces or spending thousands of dollars on equipment. While most people are frozen by the fear of being on camera, these individuals are using the hidden power of artificial intelligence to generate automated content that works and earns for them 24 hours a day. The secret to dominating this game isn't about having a famous face. It's about knowing how to command the right tools to create scripts, voices, and visuals that magnetically hold the audience's attention. I've gained access to a strategic method that reveals the exact roadmap for you to build your own invisible digital empire. Mastering AI to turn clicks into a real source of income. It is the perfect opportunity for those seeking financial and geographical freedom without having to deal with the pressure of being a public figure on the internet. Best of all, you can seize this opportunity right now for a symbolic price. The complete training is under an exclusive promotion, dropping from $97 to just $17. This is your passport to unlocking the knowledge you need to start your professional journey with AI today. Click the first link in the description to secure your spot while this discount is still active. Forensic psychologists studied the case for years, looking for signs of a break in his mental foundation. Some pointed to the high stress of his life, while others looked toward the spiritual, suggesting a darker influence. In the end, the files were closed, but the mystery of his motivation remains as open as a wound. Ronald Popo, despite his trauma, became a symbol of resilience for the people of the Miami streets. He lived in the shadows before the attack, and he returned to them afterward, though under professional care. His silence on the matter spoke louder than any interview, a quiet dignity in the face of horror. The MacArthur Causeway has seen many accidents and crimes, but none have reached this level of depravity. It stands as a monument to the unpredictable nature of the human mind when pushed to its furthest limits. The asphalt has been cleaned, but the stains on the memory of the witnesses can never be washed away. Every year on the anniversary, some people leave flowers, while others simply avoid the bridge entirely. There is a collective weight that settles over the area, a reminder of the fragility of the social contract. We walk past strangers every day, never knowing what hunger might be lurking just behind their eyes. The bath salts theory persisted in the public consciousness, despite the lack of evidence in the labs. It was a comfort to believe that a drug caused it, rather than a spontaneous eruption of human evil. Facing the truth that a man could do this unassisted was far too much for the city to bear. Eugene's final moments were spent in a state of primal bliss, unbothered by the laws of man or God. He died as he lived in those final 18 minutes, a creature of pure, unadulterated instinct and blood. The sirens that filled the air that day have long since faded, but the echoes remain in Miami's soul. The heat in Florida has a way of slowing time down, making moments of violence feel like an eternity. For Popo, those 18 minutes were a lifetime of pain compressed into a single, humid afternoon. The water of the bay watched silently, reflecting the carnage without judgment or any hint of mercy. Security footage captured parts of the attack, grainy images that look like scenes from a horror film. The lack of color and the jerky movements of the figures only add to the sense of wrongness. It is a digital record of a man losing his humanity in real time, frame by agonizing frame. The medical staff who treated Popo spoke of the difficulty in repairing a face that had been torn away. It wasn't just a physical wound, it was a psychological erasure of the man's identity and history. He was a man without a face, a walking reminder of the day Miami stared into the abyss. Some believe the causeway is haunted, not by ghosts, but by the energy of the violence itself. A heavy oppressive feeling often greets those who walk the path during the heat of the midday sun. It is as if the air remembers the growls and the screams that once dominated the coastal breeze. The legal battles regarding the police shooting were brief, as the danger to the public was undeniable. The officer involved carried the burden of taking a life, even one that had become so monstrous. It is the hidden cost of protecting a society from the predators that emerge from the shadows. Rudy Eugene's grave remains a quiet place, rarely visited and mostly forgotten by the general public. He is a footnote in criminal history, a name associated with a crime that defied all previous categories. But for the people of Florida, he is the reason they look twice at the people on the street. The Miami zombie incident changed the way the city views its homeless and vulnerable populations. It brought a harsh light to the people living under the bridges, though the light offered little warmth. The fear of the unknown became a physical presence in the city, a shadow that never truly left. As the sun sets over the MacArthur Causeway today, the neon lights of South Beach begin to flicker. The beauty of the skyline is a mask, a beautiful lie told to keep the tourists coming to the shore. But we know what happened on that sidewalk, and we know that the hunger is never truly satisfied. Florida's history is a map of blood, and the Eugene case is one of its darkest and most vivid points. It serves as a warning that paradise is only a few degrees away from a complete and total breakdown. The waves continue to crash against the pillars of the bridge, indifferent to the suffering of men. If you listen closely on a quiet day, the city sounds like a machine, humming with a nervous energy. Everyone is moving, everyone is searching, and everyone is trying to stay in the light of the sun because they know that once the light fades, the rules of the world begin to change and shift. The witnesses of the attack often sought therapy, unable to erase the images from their mental screens. They saw something that shouldn't exist: a human being treating another as a source of nourishment. It broke their understanding of what it means to be a person in a modern, organized society. Popo's life in the facility is quiet, a contrast to the violent crescendo that brought him there. He listens to the radio, feeling the world move on without him, a man living in a permanent dark. He is the living legacy of Rudy Eugene, a testament to the endurance of the human spirit. The police reports are filed away in dusty cabinets, a cold record of a hot and bloody afternoon. The words mutilation and flesh appear frequently, clinical terms for a very unclinical event. The paperwork is finished, but the story is far from over for those who were there that day. Every time a new drug hits the streets, the name Rudy Eugene is mentioned in the local news again. He has become the gold standard for drug-induced madness, even if the drugs weren't actually there. His name is a shortcut for the fear of losing control, of becoming something unrecognizable to ourselves. The MacArthur Causeway remains a vital link, a path for thousands of souls every single hour. They drive over the spot where the blood was spilled, oblivious to the history beneath their tires. The city moves on, as all cities must, but the ground underneath remembers everything. The shadows under the highway are long and deep, even when the sun is directly overhead. It is a place where the unwanted gather, seeking a moment of respite from the Florida heat. And it is a place where, for 18 minutes, the world saw what lies beneath the surface. The story of the Miami Devourer is a story of a sudden and complete psychological collapse. It is a story of a victim who had nothing left to lose, only to lose even more to a stranger. And it is a story of a city that had to learn how to live with a monster in its midst. We look for patterns in the violence, hoping to find a way to predict and prevent the next attack. But Rudy Eugene offered no patterns, no warnings, and no clear signs of the monster within. He simply arrived, he fed, and he died, leaving the rest of us to wonder why. The silence of the bridge at night is a heavy thing, filled with the ghosts of 1,000 stories. But the story of May 26th is the loudest of them all, a scream that echoes through the years. It is a scream for an explanation that the universe is simply not willing to provide to us. As the humidity rises, the mind begins to wander and the line between reality and nightmare blurs. In Florida, that line is thinner than anywhere else, a fragile barrier against the encroaching swamp. And when that barrier breaks, the results are always written in blood and marked by scars. Ronald Popo's face may be gone, but his presence is a constant reminder of our own vulnerability. We are all just a few minutes away from a life-altering encounter with a force we cannot control. The MacArthur Causeway is just a bridge, but it is also a gateway to the darkest parts of us. The news cameras have long since moved on to the next tragedy, the next scandal, the next scandal, the next storm. But the archives remain, holding the grainy footage and the frantic 911 calls for the future to see. They will look back at 2012 and wonder how a civilized city could let such a thing happen. The answer is that civilization is a choice we make every day, a choice that Rudy Eugene abandoned. He opted for the primal, the ancient, and the horrific, and he paid for that choice with his life. But the cost was also paid by the man he chose to consume on that sunny, Miami afternoon. The heat continues to shimmer off the asphalt, a visual representation of the instability of the air. Nothing is quite what it seems in the Florida light, and the shadows are always deeper than they look. We walk the path, we drive the bridge, and we hope that the hunger remains dormant for now. The Miami zombie will always be a part of the city's identity, a dark stain on its neon-colored vest. It is a story told in whispers, a curiosity for the macabre-minded, and a nightmare for the rest. It is the reality of the MacArthur Causeway, a place where the sun and the teeth meet. Rudy Eugene's life was unremarkable until the moment it became a historical landmark of horror. He is the proof that anyone can become a headline if the conditions of the soul are just right. The causeway doesn't care, it just remains, a cold path of concrete over the warm, blue water. As we move to the next story, remember the face of Ronald Popo and the teeth of Rudy Eugene. Remember that paradise is a thin veneer, and underneath, the predators are always waiting for a sign. The Florida sun is setting, and the long shadows are beginning to stretch across the land once again. This concludes the first chapter of our journey into the dark heart of the Sunshine State's history. The blood has dried, the bridge is open, and the monster is gone, but the fear remains. Turn your gaze now toward the north, where a different kind of hunter was preparing his own feast. The Gainesville Ripper. In the late summer of 1990, the city of Gainesville was vibrant with the energy of 20,000 students. The University of Florida was a sprawling campus of brick and ivy, where the future felt entirely secure. But in the surrounding woods, a drifter named Danny Rolling was preparing a different kind of curriculum. Rolling arrived in Gainesville with a history of violence and a deep-seated hatred for the world. He found a campsite in the dense Florida brush, hidden from the eyes of the law and the residents. He watched the apartment complexes, noting the rhythms of the students and the windows left unlocked. On August 24th, he chose his first targets, Sonia Larson and Christina Powell, marking a wave of terror. He entered their apartment with a practiced ease, carrying a crowbar knife that he treated with reverence. Rolling did not kill quickly. He wanted to savor the terror and exert a godlike control over the innocent. The scenes he left behind were carefully staged, tableau of human misery and broken bloody dreams. He posed the bodies in ways that were meant to shock the first person who entered the silent room. The next morning, the news of the double homicide began to spread through the campus like a toxic gas, but Rolling was far from finished. He was only beginning to fulfill the demands of the voices in his mind. The following day, he broke into the home of Krista Hoyt, a student who worked for the sheriff's office. He waited for her in the darkness, a shadow among shadows, listening to the sound of her approaching feet. The brutality inflicted upon Krista Hoyt was so extreme that it caused seasoned investigators to weep openly. He decapitated her and placed her head on a shelf, facing the room, as if she were a spectator. The discovery of her body sent Gainesville into a state of absolute unventilated panic that lasted for weeks. Classes were cancelled, and a mass exodus began as students fled the city in a desperate attempt to stay alive. Hardware stores sold out of locks and mace within hours of the news breaking across the local stations. Those who stayed slept in groups, huddled together in living rooms with the lights on and weapons gripped. Rolling watched this panic from his camp, feeding off the fear he manufactured with his own hands. 2 nights later, he struck again, targeting Tracy Pauls and Manny Taboda in a final, explosive burst. Taboda was an athletic man, but he was no match for the suddenness of Rolling's silent, midnight attack. The 5 murders were committed in just 72 hours, leaving the state of Florida in a deep shock. The police were under immense pressure, but the killer seemed to vanish into the humidity in the swamp. They initially arrested a local student, a man whose eccentricities made him an easy scapegoat for the public. But as the investigation deepened, the focus shifted to a man arrested for a simple grocery store robbery. Danny Rolling's DNA was eventually linked to the crime scenes through an effective matching process. When they searched his campsite, they found the tools of his trade and recordings of his own voice. Rolling had recorded himself singing about his crimes, a glimpse into a fractured and narcissistic mind. He spoke of Yancey, a secondary personality he claimed was responsible for the blood that stained his hands. Whether Yancey was a real psychological fracture or a convenient lie, the result was the same: 5 lives gone. The trial was a grim recitation of facts that seemed too dark for a public courtroom in a civilized society. Rolling eventually pleaded guilty, perhaps realizing that his notoriety was the only thing he had left. He was sentenced to death, but the shadow of his actions remained long after the final verdict was read. The case inspired the movie Scream, but the real story was devoid of any clever dialogue or masks. It was a story of a man who brought the violence of the deep woods into the sanctuaries of the young. The apartments where the students died were renovated, but their history is forever etched into the floorboards. In Gainesville, the month of August still carries a weight, a memory of the year the music finally stopped. Rolling spent years on death row, writing letters that further revealed his obsession with his own legacy. He never showed true remorse for the families he destroyed or the fear he instilled in a generation. His execution in 2006 was a quiet affair, a final ending to a man who lived for the screams of others. As the lethal drugs entered his system, he sang one last song, a final act of defiance against the world. The silence that followed his death was a relief, but it did not bring back the 5 souls he stole. The investigation revealed that Rolling had also committed a triple homicide in Shreveport, Louisiana, before Florida. He was a traveling storm of violence, a man who left a trail of broken families across the southern states. His arrival in Gainesville was not a coincidence, but the result of a hunter seeking the perfect environment. The psychological profile of Danny Rolling was one of a man who felt small and sought to become large through terror. He used the knife as an extension of his will, a tool to carve his importance into the flesh of the innocent. The posing of the bodies was his way of ensuring that he would never be forgotten by those who found them. Krista Hoyt's family had to endure the graphic details of her final moments during the court proceedings. The cruelty he showed her was a specific message to the law enforcement community she was a part of. It was a challenge to the city, a statement that no one was truly safe from the Ripper's hand. The fear in the student housing complexes was so thick it could be felt by anyone walking the streets. The sound of a door closing or a floorboard creaking was enough to trigger a panic attack in the survivors. Gainesville had lost its innocence, replaced by a cold realization that evil could live in the next apartment. The police force worked around the clock, haunted by the possibility that they might find a 6th victim. Every tip was followed, every suspicious person questioned, while the real killer sat in a jail cell for a robbery. It was a stroke of luck and forensic science that finally brought the nightmare to a definitive conclusion. Rolling's letters from prison were often filled with religious imagery, a twisted attempt to justify his path. He saw himself as a martyr or a soldier in a war that only he understood, fighting against his own demons. But the families of the victims saw only a coward who preys on the vulnerable in the middle of the night. The memorial for the victims stands as a place of quiet reflection, away from the noise of the campus. It lists the names of those whose futures were stolen by a man who had no future of his own. Students still visit the site, leaving tokens of remembrance and a silent promise to never forget. The Gainesville Ripper became a name that stood alongside the most notorious serial killers in history. His method of operation was studied by the FBI's behavioral science unit to help catch others like him. He provided a map of a broken mind, but he provided no way to fix what was truly wrong with him. The impact on the University of Florida was profound, leading to a massive overhaul of campus security. Blue light emergency phones were installed, and security patrols were increased tenfold in the aftermath. The architecture of safety was built on the foundation of the tragedy that Rolling had created. The media coverage of the trial was a circus, with every detail splashed across the front pages of newspapers. The public's fascination with the macabre was fed daily by the revelations of the courtroom testimony. It was a reminder that we are often drawn to the very things that terrify us the most in the dark. Rolling's final meal was a simple request, a mundane moment for a man who had committed the extraordinary. He ate, while the families of his victims waited for the clock to strike the hour of his departure. The disparity between his final comfort and his victims' final moments was not lost on anyone present. The state of Florida carries out its executions with a clinical precision that mirrors the nature of the crimes. The chamber is a place of absolute quiet, a room where the debt of blood is finally and officially collected. For Danny Rolling, the chamber was the only place left for him to go after a life of destruction. The echoes of his songs still haunt the archives of the investigation, a voice from the beyond the grave. They are the sounds of a man who was satisfied with the pain he had caused to the world around him, but the songs have no power anymore, silenced by the hand of the law and the passage of time. Gainesville has grown, its borders expanding and its population increasing with every passing year. The new generation of students knows the name of the Ripper, but they do not feel the coldness of 1990. But for the faculty and long-term residents, the memory is a scar that aches when the weather turns. The woods where Rolling camped are still there, thick with palmettos and the sound of the Florida night. They look peaceful, but they once hid a man who was the personification of everything we fear in the woods. The shadows under the trees are the same shadows that he used to move through the city unseen. The legacy of the Ripper is one of broken potential and a community that had to learn to heal itself. It is a story of how one man's madness can alter the course of thousands of lives in a single weekend. And it is a story of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of absolute and total darkness. When you look at the photos of the victims and see the lives they should have lived, the careers they should have had, Sonja, Christina, Krista Tracy, and many names that are now synonymous with a tragedy of the highest order. They are the reason we tell this story, to honor their memory and to warn of the predators among us. The crowbar knife is locked away in an evidence locker, a piece of metal that became a vessel for evil. It no longer has the power to hurt, but it remains a chilling artifact of a time when Gainesville was a hunt. It is a reminder that the tools of death are often simple, but the intent behind them is complex. The psychological damage to the first responders is something that is rarely discussed in the official reports. They saw things that the human mind is not designed to process, images that stayed with them forever. The cost of justice is often paid by those who have to witness the results of the injustice. Rolling's claim of multiple personalities was eventually dismissed by the court as a legal maneuver. He was found to be fully aware of his actions, a man who chose the path of the predator with clarity. There was no Yancey to blame. There was only Danny Rolling and the choices that he made. The Florida legal system proved its resolve in the face of such overwhelming and senseless violence. The appeals were handled with care, ensuring that the eventual justice would be final and beyond reproach. The state had a duty to the victims, and it fulfilled that duty in the quiet room at Rafe. As the sun sets over the campus today, the students walk to their dorms, talking and laughing in the light. They are safe, for now, protected by the lessons learned in the blood of those who came before them. But the night still comes, and the woods still hold the potential for a different kind of shadow to emerge. The story of the Gainesville Ripper is a chapter in a larger book of Florida's dark and humid history. It is a chapter that no one wanted to write, but one that must be read to understand the state's soul. The blood has been washed away, but the memory remains as a warning to all who listen. We search for meaning in the madness, but sometimes there is no meaning to be found in the dark. Some men are simply born with a hunger for the pain of others, a void that can never be filled. Danny Rolling was one of those men, a drifter who found his purpose in the destruction of the innocent. The humidity of the Florida summer is a heavy blanket that smothers the sounds of the city at night. In that silence, it is easy to imagine the footsteps of someone moving through the grass outside your window. It is the legacy of the Ripper, the fear that the door you locked might not be enough to keep the evil out. The names of the victims are carved into stone, a permanent testament to their lives and their tragic ends. The stone is cold to the touch, a contrast to the warmth of the lives that were so abruptly taken. It is a place of pilgrimage for those who seek to honor the fallen and remember the cost of evil. Rolling's execution did not bring closure to everyone. Some wounds are too deep to ever truly heal, but it did bring an end to his ability to haunt the living with his letters and his narcissistic songs. The world is a slightly better place without his presence, though the scars he left will always remain. The case remains a staple of criminal justice classes, a perfect example of a serial killer's methodology. It is taught to the next generation of detectives, ensuring that they will know what to look for in the dark. The Ripper's life was a tragedy, but his death was a necessary act of balance for the scales of justice. Gainesville continues to thrive, a city of learning and progress in the heart of the Sunshine State. But it is also a city of memory, a place where the past is never truly gone from the streets. The Ripper is a ghost now, a story told to remind us that the world is not always a safe place. The air in the apartment complexes is still, the students are asleep, and the locks are all engaged. It is the piece of a city that has known the worst and has survived to see the morning light. But the woods are still there, and the drifters still move through the state, looking for a place to rest. We tell these stories not to glorify the killer, but to acknowledge the darkness that exists in our world. To ignore the Ripper is to ignore a part of our own history, a part of the human condition. He was a man, and that is perhaps the most terrifying thing about the entire story of his crimes. The Florida sun will rise tomorrow, and the campus will be filled with the sounds of a new day. The horror of 1990 will be a little further away, a little more like a movie and less like the truth. But the truth is written in the archives, and it is written in the hearts of those who were there. Danny Rolling is a name that will forever be linked to the city of Gainesville in the state of Florida. He is the hunter who became the hunted, the singer of songs that no one ever wanted to hear. His legacy is one of blood and fear, a shadow that the sun can never quite burn away from the land. As we conclude this second part of our journey, take a moment to remember the 5 who were lost. Their lives were more than just the way they ended. They were people with dreams that were never realized. The Ripper is gone, but the echo of his knife remains in the quiet hours of the Florida night. We move now to the final story, a tale of a long wait for justice and a child whose name is a prayer. The scene shifts to Merritt Island, where the water holds the secrets of a night 46 years ago. The darkness is deepening, and the stories are only getting harder to hear as the night goes on. The ghost of Merritt Island. Merritt Island is a place defined by the overlap of the modern and the ancient, where rockets launch into space. In 1979, it was a quieter place, a community of families who felt safe in the isolation of the coast. On the night of May 11th, the humidity was thick, and the sound of crickets filled the air around the Kunosh home. 6-year-old Rebecca Kunosh was asleep in her bedroom, a room filled with the toys and dreams of a child. She had no way of knowing that Brian Frederick Jennings was circling the house, watching the windows for entry. Jennings was 21 years old, but his mind was already a reservoir of dark and unchecked impulses. He slipped through a window, moving with a predatory silence that avoided every creak in the floorboards. He took Rebecca from her bed, her small frame no match for his strength and his sudden, terrifying presence. He carried her out into the night, leaving the safety of her home for the darkness of the Merritt Island brush. They arrived at a desolate area near a canal, a place where the water was stagnant and the trees were thick. What happened next is a record of human depravity that the state of Florida would spend decades trying to rectify. Jennings subjected the child to a series of physical and sexual assaults that defied any rational understanding. He acted with a cold, detached cruelty, as if the life in his hands were nothing more than a toy to be broken. Rebecca's struggle was short and hopeless, her small voice lost in the vastness of the marsh and the night. When he was finished with the assault, Jennings realized he could not let his victim speak to the world. He took the child to the edge of the canal and held her beneath the surface of the dark, tepid water. He watched the bubbles rise until there was nothing left but the reflection of the moon on the ripples. He left her body there, discarded in the mud, and returned to his own life as if nothing had happened. The disappearance of Rebecca Kunosh sparked a massive search, a community coming together in a desperate hope. But that hope died when her small body was discovered by the water's edge, ending the innocence of the island. The investigation was swift, fueled by the righteous anger of a community that had lost its sense of security. Evidence quickly pointed to Jennings, a local man whose history of instability was well known to those around him. When he was arrested, he showed no sign of the horror he had committed, maintaining a mask of indifference. The trial was a harrowing journey through the final, terrifying moments of a 6-year-old's life in the swamp. Jennings was found guilty and sentenced to death, a verdict that many felt was the only acceptable answer. But the wheels of justice in Florida can turn with an agonizing slowness, especially in cases of capital punishment. For 46 years, Jennings lived in a cell, his life sustained by the very taxpayers whose peace he shattered. He became one of the longest-serving inmates on death row, his name appearing periodically in the news for appeals. Each appeal was a fresh wound for the Kunosh family, a reminder that their nightmare had no final chapter. They watched the decades past the 80s, the 90s, and the turn of the millennium while Jennings remained alive. In the meantime, the canal on Merritt Island remained a place of grim pilgrimage for those who remembered. The landscape changed, but the feeling of the area stayed heavy, as if the water itself held the memory. Finally, in early 2025, the legal avenues were exhausted, and the execution date was set by the state. Jennings was now an old man, his body failing, but the state saw only the monster who had stolen a life. He was moved to the Florida State Prison in Rayford, the final destination for the most depraved souls. On the day of the execution, the air outside the prison was still, as if nature itself were waiting for the end. Jennings was strapped to the gurney, his face a map of age and bitterness, still refusing to offer an apology. At the signal, the lethal chemicals began their journey into his veins, a sterile end to a violent existence. He took a few shallow breaths, his eyes closed, and then he was gonna ghost, finally released from the world. The announcement of his death brought no celebration, only a sense of profound, heavy finality for the island. For the Kunosh family, the execution didn't bring Rebecca back, but it ensured her killer would never breathe again. Merritt Island remains beautiful, but the story of Rebecca Kunosh is woven forever into its dark history. It is a cautionary tale about the darkness that can exist in the most unsuspecting of neighbors next door. Even now, some residents avoid the canal at night, claiming to hear the soft sound of water splashing. They say the spirit of the child is still there, a lingering presence that no amount of justice could release. The search for Rebecca had mobilized hundreds of volunteers, people who had never met the girl but loved her. They combed the mangroves and the beaches, their flashlights cutting through the thick Florida night. The transition from a search and rescue to a recovery mission was a moment of collective heartbreak for the county. Jennings had been a drifter of sorts, a man who moved on the edges of society without leaving much of a trace. His choice of a victim was based on opportunity and the absolute lack of a moral compass in his soul. He saw the vulnerability of a child and chose to exploit it for his own dark and twisted gratification. The forensics of 1979 were limited, but the evidence left at the canal was enough to tie him to the crime. The mud, the water, and the biological traces told a story that Jennings tried to deny with every breath. It was a case built on the meticulous work of detectives who refused to let a child's killer walk free. During his decades on death row, Jennings became a fixture of the Florida legal system's long-term population. He saw many others come and go, their lives ended by the state, while his own case lingered in the courts. He was a man who had mastered the art of survival, even within the confines of a high-security prison cell. The Kunosh family had to watch their daughters' peers grow up, graduate, and start families of their own. Every milestone for others was a reminder of what had been stolen from Rebecca on that night in May. The passage of time did not heal the wound. It only changed the way the family carried the pain with them. The canal where she was found has been the site of many changes in the surrounding environment over the years. But for the old-timers of Merritt Island, it will always be the place where the light went out for a little girl. They tell their children to stay away from the water, not just for the gators, but for the memories it holds. The legal team for Jennings fought until the very last hour, filing stays that were ultimately rejected by the courts. It was a high-stakes game of life and death, played out in the sterile rooms of the Florida Supreme Court. But the weight of the crime was too heavy for any legal maneuver to overcome in the end of the day. Rayford Prison is a place where the air feels different, heavy with the history of the men who have died there. Jennings entered the chamber with a slow, shuffling gait, the walk of a man who knew his time was finally up. The witnesses watched in silence, their faces illuminated by the harsh, fluorescent lights of the observation room. The chemicals used in the execution are designed to be painless, a mercy that Jennings never showed his victim. The contrast between the two deaths is a point of contention for many who followed the case over the years. But the state is not a monster. It is a machine designed to carry out the will of the law and the people. After the execution, the body of Jennings was removed in a plain white van, destined for an unmarked grave. There was no one to claim him, no one to mourn the passing of a man who had brought so much sorrow. He left the world as he had lived in it for 46 years, alone and surrounded by stone walls. The Kunosh family issued a short statement, thanking the state for finally closing the book on their tragedy. They spoke of Rebecca as a girl who loved life, and they asked the public to remember her smile instead of her death. It was a final act of love for a daughter who had been gone longer than she had ever been with them. Merritt Island's nights are still filled with the sounds of the swamp, the life that continues despite the darkness. The stars look down on the island, the same stars that Rebecca might have looked at from her bedroom window. The island has moved on, but the story of 1979 is a part of its foundation, a dark brick in its wall. We look at the history of Florida and see many such stories, but the case of Rebecca Kunosh is unique in its length. 46 years is a lifetime for most, a span of time that saw the world change in ways Jennings couldn't imagine. But for the victims of crime, time is a different thing, a circle that always leads back to the moment of loss. The canal water is dark and opaque, hiding whatever lies beneath its surface from the prying eyes of men. It is a fitting metaphor for the human mind, which can hide impulses just as dark and just as dangerous. We never truly know the people we live next to, and that is the terror of the story of Bryan Jennings. The community of Merritt Island has a long memory, and the story of the little girl in the canal is passed down. It is a way of keeping her alive, a way of ensuring that her name is not forgotten by the waves of time. She is the ghost of the island, a reminder of the fragility of life and the persistence of memory. The execution of an old man for a crime committed in his youth is a difficult concept for some to grasp. But justice does not have an expiration date, and the blood of a child does not dry with the passing of years. The state of Florida proved that it would wait as long as necessary to fulfill its promise to the innocent. The files on the Kunosh case are thousands of pages long, a paper trail of a nightmare that lasted for decades. They hold the photos, the statements, and the maps of the island as it was back in the late 70s. They are the only physical remains of a tragedy that redefined the meaning of safety for a whole community. When the rockets launch from the nearby cape, the ground on Merritt Island shakes with the power of the engines. It is a sound of the future, of progress and the human reach for the stars above our heads. But the ground also holds the past, the quiet and still places where the water meets the dark and heavy mud. The residents of the island are a resilient people, accustomed to the storms and the heat of the coastal life. But the storm that Bryan Jennings brought was one that no one could have prepared for in their own home. It was a storm of the soul, a hurricane of violence that left no one unchanged in its wake. We tell these stories to honor the victims, to give them a voice that was taken from them in the dark. Rebecca Kunosh was more than a headline. She was a life, a potential, and a daughter of the Florida sun. Her story is a reminder that even in paradise, the shadows are always waiting for the sun to go down. The Florida State Prison at Rayford stands as a grim sentinel over the landscape of the northern part of the state. It is the place where the stories of men like Rolling and Jennings come to their final and silent conclusion. The walls are high, and the wire is sharp, a physical barrier between the world and the monsters it creates. The walk to the execution chamber is known as the last mile, a path that Jennings had plenty of time to contemplate. He had nearly half a century to think about the night in 1979 and the choice he made by the canal. Whether he felt remorse in those final steps is something only he and the shadows will ever truly know. The witnesses who left the prison that day spoke of a feeling of peace that had finally descended on the case. The tension that had existed for 46 years had finally been broken by the administration of justice. The air felt lighter, the sky looked clearer, and the long wait for the end was finally over for everyone. In the quiet hours of the morning, Merritt Island is a place of peace and natural beauty for those who live there. The birds call out to each other across the marshes, and the water flows gently toward the sea. It is the world that Rebecca should have grown up in, a world of light and sound and infinite possibility. But we must also acknowledge the darkness, for to ignore it is to let it grow unchecked in the hidden corners. The story of the canal is a story of what happens when we forget to watch the windows and the doors. It is a story that teaches us the value of the light and the cost of the shadows that we let in. The names of the prosecutors and the judges have changed over the years, but the goal remained the same. The state of Florida never wavered in its pursuit of the final penalty for the crime against the child. It was a multi-generational effort to ensure that the law was upheld, and the victim was finally honored. Jennings' life on death row was a mundane existence of routine and the slow passage of time in a cell. He watched the world through a television screen, seeing the changes that he was no longer a part of. He was a man out of time, a relic of a violent night that he could never truly escape from. The canal remains, its banks covered in the thick growth of the Florida brush and the roots of trees. It is a quiet place, away from the tourists and the traffic of the main roads of the island. But it is a place that everyone knows, even if they don't talk about it in the polite company of the day. The legacy of Rebecca Kunosh is one of a community that refused to forget the loss of one of its own. She is a symbol of the innocent, a reminder of the duty we have to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Her name is spoken with a soft voice, a reverence for a life that was taken far too soon from the world. The state of Florida has many such ghosts, names that are etched into the memory of its citizens and its land. But the ghost of Merritt Island is one that speaks of the endurance of justice and the long reach of the law. It is a story that ends in a sterile room, but it begins in a bedroom with a window left open to the night. As the sun reaches its peak over the island today, the heat begins to build, and the air becomes heavy once again. It is the Florida we know, a place of beauty and intensity that can overwhelm the senses of the unprepared. And in that heat, the stories of the past continue to simmer, waiting for the next generation to hear them. We finish this journey with a sense of the weight that these stories carry for the people of the state. They are not just entertainment, they are the history of a land that is as violent as it is beautiful. The blood of the past is the foundation of the present, and we must respect the lessons it has to teach us. Bryan Frederick Jennings is gone, his name a footnote in a larger history of American crime and punishment. But Rebecca Kunosh remains, a spirit of the island that will always be 6 years old and always be loved. The water of the canal continues to flow, a silent witness to a night that will never be forgotten by the island. Take a final look at the palm trees and the blue water, and remember that even in paradise, there is a cost. The shadows are long, the night is deep, and the stories of Florida are never truly finished for the living. Be careful where you walk, and be careful who you trust, for the darkness is always closer than it seems. This concludes our exploration of the macabre and the unexplained in the heart of the Sunshine State today. We have walked through the blood and the shadows, and we have seen the faces of the monsters and the victims. The night is coming to an end, but the stories will always be here, waiting in the dark for those who seek them. If you have found this journey into the darkness compelling, please support the preservation of these stories. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to continue exploring the shadows that most would rather forget. Stay vigilant, for the night is long, and the truth is often more terrifying than fiction. Have you ever stopped to think that the videos you just watched with flawless scripts and engaging narrations might have been created by someone who never even touched a camera or a microphone? There is a new digital elite profiting heavily behind the scenes of YouTube and social media. building massive channels without ever showing their faces or spending thousands of dollars on equipment. While most people are frozen by the fear of being on camera, these individuals are using the hidden power of artificial intelligence to generate automated content that works and earns for them 24 hours a day. The secret to dominating this game isn't about having a famous face. It's about knowing how to command the right tools to create scripts, voices, and visuals that magnetically hold the audience's attention. I've gained access to a strategic method that reveals the exact roadmap for you to build your own invisible digital empire. Mastering AI to turn clicks into a real source of income, it is the perfect opportunity for those seeking financial and geographical freedom without having to deal with the pressure of being a public figure on the internet. Best of all, you can seize this opportunity right now for a symbolic price. The complete training is under an exclusive promotion, dropping from $97 to just $17. This is your passport to unlocking the knowledge you need to start your professional journey with AI today. Click the first link in the description to secure your spot while this discount is still active.